very excited to hear who you've got your player spotlight on.
I like it. And now we can just try it. We can try to duel each other on who can be more of a football hipster, who can name the most obscure player, the player who's not getting enough attention, and then put our spotlight on them. So I'm up for the challenge. As long as we have the viewers vote and I win some vote eventually. I mean, my God. Okay, I digress. Who do I want to spotlight? I think this is worthy of a 2-beer show. We've been, to take people behind the curtain, I think Dino mentioned, we're working on if I can work this can of, there we go. We're working a little overtime. We're recording some of these Olympic previews. Stay tuned for that. We'll get to that later, though. So for my player spotlight, worthy of this 2-beer show, I'm going with your Orlando Pride midfielder, Adriana. Bit of an obvious pick here.
Let's go.
But I think there are some numbers kind of underlying this performance. So obviously, an impressive 3-0 win on the road in LA for your Pride against Angel City. Adriana has a brace. Let's go back to the beginning of the season. So in Adriana's first 6 appearances this season, 4 of which we will call in the time of 2024 BB, which is before Banda, Adriana was primarily listed as a forward or a winger. In that time, she accounted for 1.1 XG and 1.2 XAG, expected assisted goals. Since then, she's had her placement in the squad mixed up by Seb Hines, and her positions listed on the pitch have either primarily been a midfielder or a winger for the majority of the time. And a lot of the time, she's lining up right behind Banda. But you can tell from watching the matches, and I'll be curious to ask you about this, that it feels like she has a great deal of freedom to kind of move around. But since May 11th, her next 6 appearances, since playing more as a bit of an attacking midfielder, your traditional midfielder, a winger, Adriana has accounted for 3 expected goals and 1.6 expected assisted goals. And here's the interesting part about it to me, is that her touches and her carries have not even gone up by any real significant margin. And her pass completion percentage hasn't really skyrocketed either. That's been pretty kind of living in that mid-70s kind of range. So I will cede to your expertise here as somebody who watches this team as closely as anybody in media. The opinion that I'm going to throw out here, or maybe the theory that I'm going to throw out here, is that I just think Adriana's Brazilian footballing supercomputer of a brain just needed a little more time to efficiently recognize when to trail plays, when to lead the attack, and kind of how to fit in placed next to a supernova like Banda. What have you been seeing from her?
I'm going to actually zoom out to the whole season.
Yeah.
I think I've seen a lot of up and down play from Adriana, and not because she's been up and down, but it really is like, it's sort of a chess piece type argument. I talked last week about just how Orlando was like just throwing 8 players forward and just being like, all right, let's see you contend with this. Even with that approach, it kind of felt like the offense was still not, it's sort of like an engine running. You could still hear some stuff knocking around there. It didn't have that clean purr to it.
Yep.
But when I saw this lineup and I'm like, oh my God, Banda and Adriana up front. Because we've seen Banda and Marta, we've seen Banda and Ali Watt, we've seen I think we've seen Banda alone and 3 behind her. We've seen a lot of different permutations of this. I think this is the first time we've seen Adri and Banda just as the 2 heads of the snake.
Yeah.
They each play their own game, but they seem to be kind of like perfect complements to each other. Like a little bit of Luka Kyrie. They both are explosive, but they've got different bags. But Adri has the skills, the creativity. She brings that Brazilian flair, and she's explosive. And I think she just can hit a ceiling. Remember we talked about this too a couple weeks ago. It was who's going to be their number 2? Mm-hmm. And if Orlando gets their number 2, we talked about the 3 in Washington. We talked about the 2 in KC, and then the whole offensive package that they've got. I was really looking to this Orlando side saying, who's going to be Banda's running partner through the end of the season? And then seeing Adri up there, it looked unguardable.
Yeah.
Pick your poison. And that's the most kind of pick your poison type situation that I've seen, I think, all season. There just was no good answer that Angel City was going to be able to put forward to be able to stop that attack.
I think on that first goal, so you have Banda, she kind of starts to veer to the left, and she draws the attention. You have Marta on the left-hand side with her. And then here comes Audrey, and Marta's able to serve the ball in to get it to her in a little bit of space to where she can get the ball onto her shooting foot. And then she hits that absolute missile into the
Rocket.
top of the net. No chance for Hericic. And that's kind of what I was looking at. I think what you're alluding to here is that you just need to get her in these spaces where if you're picking your poison and your poison is to try to take away Bonda, or pardon me, maybe you think the antidote is we're going to try to take away Bonda. Now the poison you have picked is this Brazilian superstar, Adriana, who's able to get the ball and fire with a little bit of space.
Who's running right at you, who has you on your back foot, you know, and can just uncork one like that. Like, that's just ridiculous. And then I love Marta in more of a midfield role too.
Sure.
Because she still has all the ball skills. She'll take it, a little spinneroonie, just kind of leave you in a puddle and just kind of keep the offense moving. And then, just offensively, this team's really cooking defensively as well. You mentioned, now we're up to 15 matches, 11 goals allowed. At some point, somebody's going to score a 12th goal in this team. We'll see if it happens before the end of the season.
Maybe.
But your Adri point is so on the money. It's a combination of her playing off of Bonda. That's the other benefit when you don't have her in the midfield. When you have her in the midfield, she's sort of like playing within a unit, playing off of Bonda. Like, Bonda covers so much ground that she just might pull 2 or 3 defenders out near the corner flag. And then that opens up a ton of space for, the explosive striking ability of Adri and her creativity. So I don't want to jump the gun and say Seb Hines really unlocked something here, but it is possible.
Sure.
I think if we start to see performances like that from those two up front, a little bit of like, what Bay FC, I think, tried to put together with Oshoala and Kundanaji hasn't quite coalesced all the way. But if we get more of this from Orlando and there's an absolutely credible number 2 option, a 1+ XG type player when she's playing next to Bonda up front, that changes this team's ceiling.
Yeah, totally. It actually reminds me of something that our pal Chris Sharples, DAZN commentator, was talking about on our UEFA Women's Champions League final recap episode. Go back and check that episode out if you're interested. But when he was talking about Caroline Graham-Hansen, CGH, for Barcelona, and he referred to her kind of coming in off the wing as like a little bit of old school football, a little bit of like 1990s, early 2000s style of football, where you just have this incredible winger out there, this attacking winger who's running at you from the side and creating all these weird angles. For me, when we were growing up and women's football was not quite available to watch, like Thierry Henry is that guy in my mind. He was the winger who was just unstoppable. And now you kind of see it with CGH and you see it with a lot of other, like Trinity Rodman is a great example. You see Mel Swanson do it. You see Sophia Smith do it kind of for the national team, depending on their spots. If you have that with Adriana, and you have, like you pointed out, Marta still has the skills. Marta, at worst, one of the 5 best number 10s in the NWSL. Like, at worst, one of the 10 to 15 best at 38 years old, still in the world. And then Bonda. Now you have Adriana kind of flying in off the wing, creating these angles with the ability to shoot, pass, score, do everything that she can do. Your squad is a problem, man. I mean, they can win the league. They could win the double, if we're talking about winning the Shield and winning the NWSL championship. They could win a damn treble if they want to win the NWSL Liga MX tournament. I mean, what's the ceiling on this squad? I can't find it.
Again, like, this is a team that hasn't lost all season.
Right.
You just got to scoot over that part. They're, I mean, KC and Orlando is still unbeaten, 15 matches in. We're getting dangerously close to one, or maybe both these teams might be able to reach the finish line unbeaten. That'd be wild. But they just look like on another level, I think, both these teams. I tweeted also, Rafaele, who's been sort of in and out of the lineup, made an appearance in this one. The 10 times one of her cleats has touched a blade of grass, it's 10 wins, no draws, no losses. Like, her teams, whether it's the Orlando Pride or the Brazilian national team, they just do not lose when she plays. And all of a sudden, this team looks extremely loaded, and they seem to have found a little bit of a recipe offensively to potentially match, this elite defense.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's going to be interesting to see, can the defense continue to keep up? Maybe not quite this pace, but something close to it. But I got to tell you, what evidence do we have that they're not going to? Like, they look good, man. They look solid. They look smart. You talk about Hines and the organization and the competitiveness within the roster, and like these players challenging each other for playing time, but still they play so connected on top of that. So it's not like everybody's beefing trying to get minutes on the field. It's just like, I know there are cliches about this. I tell you what I'm a sucker for. I am a sucker for when a team is playing well and when a player scores a goal, everybody runs and hugs that player.
Mm-hmm.
Or when somebody misses a pass that the forward just looks up and goes, thumbs up. Hey, good idea. Good pass. I like that. You see that with this Pride team. Somebody hits the deck. I know your Miami Heat are famous for this. Somebody hits the ground. Somebody runs over to them and immediately pulls them up. It helps them get up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you cannot tell me, and I know it's corny, I know it's sports cliche, if you have a sense of love and togetherness in a team sport, that absolutely helps. And so I'm going a little off the board with some kind of maybe some woo-woo stuff here. But I feel like your squad has that combined with skill, combined with world-class players, combined with good coaching, combined with like just an overall good organizational culture, if I may use the C word here that your Miami Heat love so much. I just think they have all of that. And I just think you guys are super live to win. And I know Adriana, she scores a brace. I pick her as my player spotlight. I think she's emblematic of a lot of things that your team is doing right now.
Absolutely, because it's within her role.
That's a great point.
It was a lot of stuff today on the men's side of the Euros with Portugal and Ronaldo, and a lot of discourse on one former legend, or I guess current legend, maybe not sort of finding a new role as seamlessly as maybe Adriana has. But that's one of the beauties of this Orlando side is like they're still working stuff out, but you don't feel like anybody's pressing. You don't feel like Marta's trying to get one because Banda got one.
Yeah.
It does feel absolutely interconnected. The chemistry is great. The vibes are great. If I'm going to be a little bit critical, committing so many players forward, like the Pride have been doing the last couple of weeks, Sydney Leroux had pretty decent look or two where it kind of felt like she was just one-on-one on one of those chances against Emily Sams. You just kind of wonder if that's a different attack, a different attacker, what that might look like. And buddy, let me tell you, this weekend, we're going to have a nice long look at a real high-power, potent attack in Kansas City and seeing what this Orlando Pride defense looks like against that roster of just absolute rainmakers in KC. This has sort of Super Bowl vibes to it. I meant to fact check this. I have to imagine this is the most matches played for two teams that are undefeated this late in the season that are going head to head. It has to be.
I would have to think so. Yeah.
So this will be match 16. Both teams heading into this one unbeaten. I mean, like, what are we doing here? Like, it's going to be straight do not disturb when this one kicks off.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting watch. I'm with you. The phone is completely on do not disturb. It's a little bit of a bummer with the timing this close to the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously Chewinga will play. Malawi not in the Olympics. I'll be interested to see. I haven't seen the reporting yet, but I wonder if Banda is going to camp with Zambia. I know match week 15 was the send-off for a lot of the national team players, so it'll be interesting to see if Banda is not available for the Pride. Emily Sams is a training camp player for the U.S. women's national team. I would doubt that Sams will be available. So we might not be getting to see these teams play at full strength, but I'm still totally with you. You get to see the bones of these teams compete against each other. I think it'll also be an interesting coaching matchup between Hines and Vlatko. What do you keep in the chamber to be like, okay, well, maybe if Banda's not there, now what kind of chess game am I playing to not show any cards to Vlatko?
Yeah, I really love that angle. Yeah, it is an absolute bummer. I think we're going to see more of like a preseason type vibe in this one, unfortunately. I think I got myself too worked up thinking about the clash. But if everything works out, maybe we see these teams lock up again in the playoffs, which would just be absolutely epic. But I think it's still going to be a banger this weekend.
Totally agree. And I'm right there with you. Last week when we were talking about it, I was already hyping up this current Pride match. And then when we got to this week, they're like, send-off match for all the Olympians. I was like, oh, you're taking away the match that we wanted. So It's an interesting angle from the NWSL schedule makers. Maybe they did not expect Kansas City and Orlando to look the way they look to make them the match right before the send-off and right kind of when we get into this period where it's like we have the Olympics, but then we have the NWSL Liga MX tournament. It'll be interesting to see nonetheless. And you know what? If Temwa Chewinga's playing football somewhere, I'm watching.
100%. She's just so incredible of a player. We talked about her at the top of the show. Her ability to wear you down.
Crazy.
There was that play against Houston where she's defending the opposite end line. She tracks all the way back. She's probably the third or fourth closest to the ball as it's passing the halfway line. And by the time it gets all the way down to near the corner flag, she's on the ball, creating a goal kick for her side. Yeah. Just no business being all the way down there harassing. And she just doesn't stop. Her engine is like unbelievable. She doesn't get tired, just putting pressure on you, just waiting for, one loose touch. And she's happy to just chase. She's just like, oh yeah, I'll chase you every time. I'll be a foot, 2 feet behind you every single time. Just waiting for that moment where, you put the ball where it's not supposed to go and I make you pay.
Yeah, she gets the brace against Houston Dash. She gets the brace in goals, but I feel like we can call this, whether we rename it like the barbecue hat trick or whatever it is, 2 goals and then 1 football kicked into the Missouri River out of the freaking stadium. She blasts one. Yeah, I mean, and with that brace, she takes the lead in the Golden Boot race. Everything about her and the way she fits into the system, we have a great race for the Shield, what will ultimately be a great race for the title itself, great race for MVP, and a great race for Golden Boot. Everything is extremely alive. And now, in the middle of it, little thing called the Olympics that we get to watch 12 incredible teams. Just about as good of a spot as you could be in women's football right now.
Yeah, sport just keeps on giving. Yeah, the ball that Chewinga put in the river, shout out to our guy Mike Watts, who just about lost his mind. We kind of joke that he can hit 11 with the best of them, and he definitely hit 11, maybe a little tick higher. He dug deep on that call. So shout out to our guy. And yeah, absolutely on the Olympics coverage. We just knocked out our first preview. We talked to the great Samantha Lewis, breaking down the Matildas from Australia. We went real deep on that squad as well. We're going to try to cover as many countries, as many nations as we can. We're going to look at this tournament from every angle. We are ecstatic that we're just a few weeks out here. Still some NWSL business to kind of close out, but that's going to be one hell of a tournament. How many different combinations of 8 teams do you think could make the knockout stage? It feels like there could be 100 different combinations of 8 teams that might end up making it.
That is like an SAT problem there, I think, in terms of how many combinations. I was very average on my SAT, so I do not quite know the answer, but we have pretty much the 12 best teams you could compile. Obviously, this is where I say save Great Britain, because I think Great Britain would be an awesome addition to this field. I digress. But nevertheless, I think the tournament is going to be absolutely incredible. Must-watch television, much like any kind of Temwa Chewinga or Kansas City Current match. But yeah, man, it's another summer of football. We got a great summer of football with the World Cup last year, a great NWSL season. The good times keep on rolling.
All right, man. I think we did it. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think that's it. I like this little, couple of teams to spotlight, especially going into the break. Couple of teams, couple of players. I think we did our thing today.
You know what? Next show, let's do like a full rundown of all of the big player movements, like Mary Earps and.
Did you see Justine Jelland?
Oh, yeah. She went to
Wolfsburg.
Oh, yeah. That's a tough one.
Hate that. Probably good for her bank account, but I hate that. To the Braun Battalion, we feel for you. We're right there with you. As I believe we can safely say we're honorary members of the battalion. That news hit your boys like a ton of bricks today. Obviously, then you have Mary Earps going over to PSG. That's pretty massive. Let's carve out some time next week. We'll try to wrap our head around some of these major moves in European football. And we mentioned there is some movement into the NWSL as well, with Courtney Vine moving from the A-League in Australia over to North Carolina Courage. So we'll have plenty of player movement to talk about. Again, I'll tell you, very rarely does my heart sink when I see football news, but Jelland moving away from Braun, that one hurt. We'll get the pulse of the battalion, and we'll be back to report on it next week.
All right, man. I think we did it. It's been another episode of Into the Channel. Thank you for watching, listening, liking, subscribing, chiming in, dropping some nuggets into the comment section, and just playing hanging out with your boys. Remember to like if you liked, and subscribe or follow into the channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Links to Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much all of our socials available in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel, for always being my co-host in the spotlight. Let's fucking go. I appreciate you, man.
Likewise, buddy. I appreciate you. There are no transfer moves that are breaking up this podcast. We are a firm center back pairing, or a number 9 and a defensive midfielder, whatever spot we're in. We're in this for the long haul, and we appreciate you guys and all the kind words and the support that you've given. Thanks for rocking with us, and we will see you guys next time.